I really wanted to do something special for my 20th review, like talk about Junji Ito and his crazy works. But I think this lets me elaborate on something that more than a few people have misconstrued. When I claim something is objectively bad, I do not do so lightly, as it is a rather harsh insult. To claim you have failed to uphold the most basic rules of writing and art needs to be backed up, and I think I've done this fairly well with a few reviews on the topic that I've done, and I could do even more to establish this. But to give some kind of scale to this, to date in memory, I have found only 4 manga I feel comfortable calling objectively bad, and this is compared to the hundreds of series I have read. It's a fairly rare thing, and luckily since I'm not Japanese nor do I know Japanese, there is an automatic buffer between me and the really bad stuff, as a company won't translate something that doesn't sell well. But for some reason, a few slip through the buffer, and what's worse is they have a lot of fans, and I don't know why they like it. Like I said in my review, what is there to like about Terraformers? What is there to like about Zone 00? But today's adventure is completely different. Though it does have objective problems, the entirety of the book does in fact work on a technical level. The problem of this work is that it bothers me on every single level it can. Whether it's incompetent writing, stupid and pointless drama, or a childish understanding of cooking, I just hate this thing on every level possible. The best thing I can compare this to is when a bad reality show sells out and gets even dumber. One of the best examples of this is Fear Factor. I used to really like Fear Factor as a kid, but then after a break, it came back and with some really dumb pandering crap that's meant to entertain the dumbest of people. They started to incorporate Michael Bay explosions and even worse wireframe stunts that really undermined the entire point of the show. Another example that's a little more on topic but less equivalent on the quality is Hell's Kitchen. Now I really like this show, but I've always hated the pointless drama that's used as filler between the cooking competitions. Now I might be wrong as I've stopped watching the show, but last I knew they added stupid challenges like rowboat paddling competitions, which has nothing to do with cooking. It's about building teamwork, you idiot! Or it's an action that requires a different neurovascular system patterns, or as we like to call it, muscle memory. Pretty sure doing the same motion over and making sure everyone is in sync is not the same thing as the timing involved with cooking. This is a lot like that awful show, The Testers. What the hell does sticking your head in a box full of cockroaches have to do with being a video game tester? Alright, enough of the analogies and the intro, let's get into this proper. Without hyperbole, without exaggeration, and with all the sincerity I can possibly muster, this is the absolute worst piece of art I have ever had the displeasure to read. Great. Now I'm going to have to explain this, and this is going to take a while. There isn't one thing to point out when calling this terrible. It's pretty much everything. The only thing I can think of that didn't bother me was the art. And I know I will talk about this much more in the future, but I'm going to have to assume that this is in fact not his fault. The writing is bad enough for several different series, I'm not going to pin this on him even if it really was his fault. So jumping right in, we have the very first page, which I used to be at least happy about because it wasn't awful like Terraformers' first page. But after reading the first volume, they retroactively ruin it, so there goes another of the few good points this had going for it. Then, shortly after, a large crowd of people are cheering for a boring food competition in a restaurant that could only hold a fourth of the people currently in the restaurant, and people are screaming just how great the food is in this place. Now, maybe you missed this, but if you have a broader scope of stuff, you might have noticed a certain pattern in all of media, not just in manga. This pattern is things are often over-dramatized for dramatic effect. Go figure. This is really dumb, and the creators either think we are stupid or they are very lazy. This is a fairly common problem, and I have no idea why it's so prolific. Do we really need to see people crying and screaming and nearly fainting at how great something tastes in order to convey to the reader how good something tastes? I'm going to have to say no, since a lot of other things don't have to stoop that low to inform the reader of such things. And then we have this page. Now, I will consider the fact that a work can eventually make me so jaded that I will find something unfunny that a lot of other people will find funny, and maybe even myself would laugh at it. But this is only the 4th page of the first chapter. So then we have to ask, why am I not laughing? Maybe it's because I'm too involved with the Japanese subculture, and the shock value just puts me off rather than makes me laugh. Maybe I'm not involved enough, and if I attained some fanboy status, this would be hilarious to me, but I'm not willing to throw away my intellectual integrity just to enjoy a bad joke in a single manga. And this is the gimmick of the manga, and it's only going to get worse from here. And then we have this scene. This is the first time I had to stop reading the book. Some of you know that I read all that I have of something I plan on reviewing, and the first time I stopped here, I knew I was going to review this work, but it was going to be a while before I got to it. But this time was the only time I've ever, in the process of reading a manga for the purpose of reviewing it, that I had to stop and take a break, and then give myself a pep talk in order to give me the perseverance to make it through the not much longer of the book left. What we are about to discuss is the smaller of the two infractions, and I would appreciate it if you were to take that in consideration. So this woman just walks in and starts the whole "you should totally give us your land so we can do what we want with it" spiel, which is extremely overplayed, and by the way, this whole thing has zero impact on the overall narrative, so above all the stupid crap in this scene, none of it was even necessary. So the guy says he's not buying, and that their store is proud to have the ability to serve any dish at any time, and that is a guarantee on the store. So these people not only make money in such a small venue, but they also have enough ingredients to make any dish any customer would ever want. Do you understand the size of the building necessary just to hold all of that food? A supermarket isn't even large enough and well stocked enough for that claim, much less a small family restaurant slapped in the middle of a housing district. So rather than having this conversation with, the owner of the establishment, you basically have this extremely not legally binding at all agreement with the child of the owner who has absolutely no decision-making abilities involved with the business you are trying to destroy. Seeing as this woman is fairly retarded, she then schemes a plan to win in this arrangement. Her goons then destroy all of the ingredients in the place rather than ordering a foreign delicacy that there is no chance of them having the stock for, which there are a lot of them. But to foil this brilliant plan, the main character buys some ingredients to make his breakfast the next day, and it just so happens that the day he buys the food is the day the goons stomped all the meat. Now we have to ask ourselves two very important questions. Why did a person buy food when he's the son of a restaurant owner that owns the most well-stocked building ever built? He should have more food than he could even think to do with. Of course, an argument can be said he was going to take it home, but then why wouldn't he just take the food from the restaurant home with him? And the second question we must ask is, how contrived is this that it just happened to be the day he brought the crap for his breakfast, which is the day before he was planning to cook it? Now, we country bumpkins would call that reasonable because we live out in the country. But if you live in a massive city like most Japanese do, then you could just walk somewhere to pick up just about anything you want. So rather than him waking up and buying stuff for his breakfast that morning or just going to his restaurant, he then buys his food 24 hours before he plans on cooking it and will then carry it with him for a while, at the very least, to and from the restaurant, meaning it will not be as fresh as it could be. So the answer is extremely contrived. Then, rather than stab the person who just ruined millions of dollars worth of food, he chooses to cook for the woman because of a guarantee the store for some reason issues, when all he could have done is said that the store was closed because it was in fact closed before he got there, and he had not opened it up for customers before the woman got there. Then, for the second time, we have an over-dramatization of how great the food tastes, and this time with some artistic flair, but with the added benefit of it being retarded. So I didn't find the joke funny, but at least I got it. The food tasted so bad that it felt degrading and disgusting, like getting molested by some tentacles. And further on in the volume, we have two of them getting smothered in honey because he used honey to make the dish. But this time, they come really hard. The orgasm thing is apparent in all the great disc reaction shots, but this is the only time that it seems nothing else is involved. Like, the food by itself was so good that it doesn't need a visual representation. So was this because you hadn't decided on the way you were going to express this, or was it because you had no idea on how to express bacon or potatoes in a sexy way? Then, after he beats her but not in the correct way, he cleans up later that day, and his dad decides to close down the restaurant permanently, meaning that there was no reason to have any of this happen at all, other than to prove that the main character can cook, which is not only overused, but it brings up painful memories of Prince of Tennis, which is either bad for Food Wars or great for Prince of Tennis. And then it meanders for a bit after that, instead of ending, and then it smacks us over the head so hard with foreshadowing it's almost like a massive jukebox comes out of nowhere when you're standing underneath the waterfall. There's a list of problems that really agitate me when they come up, and the top three are really problematic for me. First is objective problems in the narrative, like plot holes and extremely contrived events. Second is melodramatic crap. I don't care that Billy didn't get your favorite topping on your ice cream. I hope you know lots of kids are forced to be sex slaves. Fuck your first world problems. And this is a lot more common in Japanese media than most would believe. And the third is, I don't like being treated as if I'm too stupid to see what a character is saying. Not only is this a terrible way to end the chapter with a cutaway to a character that we don't know, and it's not in a way that's interesting, but to give it some credit, it does tell us everything we need to know about that character. The problem comes from the main character's father almost telling his son, in order to become the best chef he can be, he will need to find an amazing woman to inspire him, and the next thing we see is a woman yelling at people for cooking poorly. It was so subtle that I didn't even notice it until months later. All you had to do was in the chapter 2 pages earlier on the panel showing his family picture, and we would have gotten that his wife was his muse. Then the first thing we see in the next picture is the girl, and our brains fire off a few neurons and we piece this together ourselves. As it is now, we have 2 extra pages that are only meant to force feed us stupid livestock, which upsets me and creates an awful endpoint to the chapter. Or I guess it could work better because no one would have kept reading this if they didn't think there wasn't a hot blonde in it. Whatever. That was chapter 1. A meandering, awful, if not beautiful into incompetence waste of time, and it will only get better from here. This part of the story is called Getting Into the School. But we're going to skip ahead a bit, but I'm going to stop here for a second and draw this. Yep. That makes it better. So we have the first interaction between the 2 love interests, and it's again an overused trope of the underdog fighting the established powers that be, which isn't a problem in of itself, but it's a weak foundation. What makes this a problem is how the 2 aspects are being represented. This turns out to be the woman being a bitch and the guy being an arrogant dick. Wow, the depth of these characters are unmeasurable. All kidding aside, they do work even if they are really shallow, but what chips away at it is the extreme prejudice that she has, and yes, I'm aware that the entire conflict is based on that, but there's more to it. This is jumping ahead a little bit, but she proves herself to be outright intellectually dishonest when she rejects a dish based purely on it being something that a commoner would eat, and not some dish made for some dilettante. Either that or her sense of taste was complete shit as her grandfather tasted the dish and immediately passed him, but that's much harder to believe since the only thing we have been told about this character is that she has a legendary sense of taste. So yeah, she can go die for all I care about her. And guess why this happened in the way it happened? If you said anything other than really lazy drama, you are naive and you need to get that checked out. Why? Just why? She is supposed to be a main character and that we are eventually supposed to like her, and you have just made that impossible for me. And then we get to what really makes this review subjective because this upset me more than it should have. See the grandfather that is the head of the greatest cooking school? Does he look familiar to you? Because he looks familiar to me. Yes, what Shin went with was the generic old and very strong leader. So this needs a bit of explanation as to why it bothers me so much. For much of my childhood I wanted to be a chef, and I really thought it was going to be my calling. But then I came to know 2 key points that worked against me. I am a picky eater, and I hate obnoxious customers. That pretty much sealed the deal for me. But I still respect the profession, and it has imprinted on me a little bit. That's why Ratatouille hits me close every time I watch it. But what gets me upset is that cooking is basically the last bastion where a professional can be respected, at least worldwide, without being overly attractive. Yeah, some authors and some artists are ugly and still are respected, but not much else. And the art of cooking was so important that literal fat bastards held higher respect than even the highest positions in political power. Recently that has changed with them getting overshadowed by musicians and actors, but there's still plenty of ugly dudes bopping around with a lot of fame and respect to their talents. And not because they're attractive. Emerald's a big bastard, but he's super cool. And Guy Fieri has a retarded hairstyle, but he's still a respected chef. And who is argued as the best chef alive is Joe Robuchon, and he looks like a random ugly French dude. Not to be offensive to them, but it just goes to show how unnecessary good looks are in cooking and being a prominent chef. And that's why it bothers me so much to see this guy in the lead instead of some fat and ugly bastard. Why put in the commonplace figure for the majority of anime and manga, especially when it's for the topic of cooking? And then if you look through his work, there's only one unattractive man, and it's him being a fat bastard, and it's made out to be as a joke. Now this is normal in most mediums, as we have understood for a very long time that attractive people sell more, but Yoto says he did research on a bunch of chefs, and I find it kind of off that he didn't notice this, or that he chose to ignore this. Skipping to the next chapter, we have a fairly good one, even if the topic of the chapter was overdone in just about everything. But whatever, you need to have fun when you can. But there happens to be a single thing that just about taints this chapter, and it's this part. This is only the second of the disgusting things he's tried. But then right after the honey-covered fish experiment, he offers the poor girl the squid legs and peanut butter. Now I'm going to give a rough guess and say it's been about 4 months since the beginning of this series, and that means he keeps making the peanut butter and squid legs all the time. And just in case you haven't read this before, the main character's stated goal is to try every combination of food possible, both good and bad. So tell me, how is he going to do that when he keeps making the same thing over and over again? The next chapter starts off with the female lead criticizing her mother's milk because she's a bitch. See what I'm talking about when I say I become jaded towards a work and therefore automatically find jokes unfunny? But I doubt that in a great series I would have been laughing at this. But no one cares. This is small potatoes compared to what's coming just around the corner. Just a few pages later, we get the third rendition of him making peanut butter and squid legs, which he then reacts to as if it was the first time of him eating it. But again, this is small compared to what happens just 2 pages later when we hit the second time I had to set the book down and walk away from it. This one panel does so much damage for the credibility of this whole thing. She forgets the person's name and face who disrespects the school she cherishes, her very name, and who then challenged her intellectually and called her out for the liar she happens to be. When you're pampered and everyone around you respects you, this affects you greatly. But I think I need to backtrack a bit in order to explain this. So the test happens, which should have implanted him into her memory banks just a little bit, with him being so cocky and arrogant, not to mention the whole undermining her legendary tongue because of her worthless pride thing. But only 1 month later, in a chapter we skipped because all it did was show us how she was a bitch and how he was an arrogant asshole, she then immediately recognizes him and then belittles him. So an entire month goes by, and she remembers his face clearly, and she might remember his name. Now, the next chapter does show that some time has passed, as this random girl's grades are slipping, and even though there is points on every side with her saying that this is her first class and of the year and all these other different things, let's just go ahead and assume that it hasn't been days since she has seen him and assume it's been months. And then during that class, he makes a professor who is a notorious hard-ass crack a smile, which apparently blows everyone's damn mind. So with it probably not being all that long since she last seen him, and then he finds the Ark of the Covenant, she should have remembered him. This is wrong and extremely unacceptable, and by comparison makes some shitty things from other series way better. When Everyday Life with Monster Girls justified rape, it wasn't malicious. That shit is still harmful, but it wasn't screaming that women ought to be sexual playthings of men. This has to be the worst thing that has ever happened to a narrative that wasn't the author deliberately screwing over all of their hard work. Well, crawling along with this last chapter, he insults the girl's cooking, and some guy we know nothing about defends her honor. So he smashes a bench with what looks like a grill brush, which comes off kind of retarded when you lose the ability to be a chef for the rest of your life because you committed battery. This is worse than just challenging him, which still happens right after the most gratuitous panty shot I have ever seen in any anime or manga. And then the battle is the same crap we've seen several times in this book before, but that's not even the worst part about this. Whoever this guy is, he's some member of some elite team of cooks that I guess run the school. And of course, he beats him because this is Prince of Tennis. To illustrate this, think of it as playing first generation Pokemon. Right after you leave Oak's house for the first time, you have to fight the Elite Four, and then you beat them. It's extremely anticlimactic to have the main character start out being the best, and then have absolutely no problem beating anyone he gets challenged by. So how has the character progressed within the first book? He's now a high schooler, and that's it. Did he learn anything? No. He started out being the best of his peers, and he continues to be the best of his peers. Man, this book gave me a lot of problems. I sometimes get asked why do I keep subjecting myself to terrible things if they bother me so much. Well, it's directly related to the philosophy that the main character has. You cannot appreciate great works of art without experiencing the terrible ones. You cannot make great art without understanding in extreme detail what makes bad art and what makes good art. Which leads me to believe that Yodo stole it from one of the autobiographies he read. With that said, I've spent way too much time critiquing terrible, and I feel it's necessary to go to the other extreme and review something I really love. So next time, we will look at Yoshiba. So yes, I in fact done goofed, but this is the only time, I think this might be the first and only time in which me completely messing up the review somehow reflects badly onto the book, or onto the series more in general, and onto Shonen Jump. We'll get into that a little bit, but let's talk about why I didn't cut out any of the earlier review, which I could have done because it was in the middle of the editing process. Well, one, there is still some valid criticism in there. The biggest thing about her not remembering him is completely, not true anymore. We learn this. But there still is valid criticisms of both the series itself and of the one-shot in there. So I was like, I might as well just leave it in there, take the, the hit on the credibility, whatever, and just kind of keep growing with it and just fix it now. But whatever, it's just, there is some criticism there that is valid, and it's whatever. But this is no longer the worst book that this work series I've ever read. It's still pretty bad, though. It's still up there, but because it's just dumb. The first, 10 minutes of that video are still completely valid, so has nothing to do with anything, but whatever. So, let's explain why I made this mistake, because there's only three technically, times in the book in which they actually, it gives you the idea that the fact that the one shot is actually in this book. The index, which that doesn't matter. I don't look at the index. You only look at the index when you're trying to look up, when you buy the mangas when you have the mangas in your hand, you don't you either use a bookmark or you just remember where you're at. You don't need the index for that, but whatever. So that's why I don't count that. So there's only two reasonable spots in which it should have told me that the one shot was coming up. The first one is it's one of those side pages where it has like an unfinished illustration or just like a minor illustration and it has some information there. So at this point of the book, like the first 5 chapters, it's pretty bad. I mean, it's pretty bad. So at that point, I didn't care. Like I wasn't care. I wasn't looking into side information. I was just trying to get through this work. I was just trying to finish reading it. So I didn't read that, which, I get that is my fault. But at least there isn't a reason. Like it wasn't me being neglectful. Yeah, it wasn't me being intellectually like dumb. It was just me not caring. And then there's a page after the whole full body thing, which that's still stupid. But after the whole full body thing, there's an open page and it says special short right there, Food War special short. But this is like an insert ad page. It's one of those things where you see it a lot, like the actual volumes of Shonen Jump and the actual publications of the actual magazines. There's a lot of like advertisement pages, and they get caught into the actual mangas and the actual the book form of the series every now and then. So I ignore those because I don't care. Like I get why that's there because it's the magazine. It's supposed to be advertising itself to you. This, on the other hand, is a thing that I've already paid for, so I don't care about it advertising to me. I just care about what's inside of it. So those are the only 2 reasons why you would believe it's the special short. And another thing that I find incredibly hilarious is the fact that after this whole thing happened, the transition from Chapter 5 to the one shot is actually significantly more cohesive and not more intelligent because that's dumb, but it's far more intelligent and more cohesive and less like retarded than the transition from Chapter 5 to Chapter 6. I'll just talk about that now. The Chapter 6, here's the whole book. Chapter 1 is just an introduction. It's him at the restaurant doing stuff at the restaurant. Chapter 2 and 3 is him taking the test and then quote unquote failing that test. Chapter 4 is him it's like the opening ceremony of the school, so it's him essentially just getting to school for the first time. And then Chapter 5 is him attending his first class, or at least I assume it's him attending his first class. The timeline is pretty messed up. The beginning of the one-shot is essentially the one girl teaching at the school and him being at the school, so it just makes sense that it's there. Chapter 6 is, in fact, a aspect... Chapter 6, the main story of that, I haven't read all of it. I flipped through the first couple pages of it because I was confused and I was wondering what happened to this. Chapter 6 is him going to his dorm. It's him being inside of his dorm. If you've ever attended a school that has a dorm, or if you even know anything about dorm, like a university or anything like that, there's a move-in period. So this is backwards. Chapter 5 should have been him moving into the dorm. Chapter 6 should have been him cooking. Yeah, his first cooking class, and him doing that, But whatever. There's plenty in the series to go wrong. Like I said, I'm not even kidding when I say that. Me goofing up makes the work look worse. Now, of course, it's not Yodo's problem that the one shot is in this. It's actually Shonen Jump's problem, and that's another thing. Another big problem I have is because it does that. Yeah, it's one of the big problems is the fact that it takes away actual monetary value from the actual book. A vast majority of Shonen Jump books have chapters 1 through 7 through them. If you've got Shonen Jump books, go look through them. You'll see it. Episode 1 has 1 through 7 for most of them. I checked it out. A bunch of them did have it. Bleach had it, I'm pretty sure. What else had it? But there was a bunch of volumes that had, it was a 1 through 7 thing. I looked through most of them. I think Claymore has it too, but I'm not sure. I can't remember. But I was just checking to make sure. Most Shonen Jump books have chapters 1 through 7. And if you count both the one shot and the weird thing, it's like a thing going back into the past kind of thing. It was a smart snippet into character development, which should have been in the series, but guess what? We don't want character development in our series, so whatever. If you count both of those, it's well over 40 pages. It's 45, 46 pages. And that's easily encompasses 2 chapters. So essentially what happened was, instead of Shonen Jump giving us an entire book, an entire manga volume, which is chapters 1 through 7, it gives us chapters 1 through 5, plus some stuff we didn't want, or we didn't need. And stuff that confuses the crap out of you if you're not paying extraordinarily large amounts of attention to stuff that doesn't need to be paid attention to. Oh, man. But I don't know, whatever. It's just it was such a problem. I could not believe I made that mistake, and at the same time, I cannot believe the fact that making that mistake put things into context and made it worse. So, yes, Food Wars having this problem, having that narrative problem, is not, the creator's fault. It's actually Shonen Jump's fault, because they're the ones who decide that kind of stuff. Unless they're like, no, I want that in there, which... So, I don't know. I did mess up. I was really bad. A lot of those things. And so, you've got to kind of hopefully put that in context. I'm sorry that I screwed this up so bad. But, at the same time, it's probably the most incompetent thing I've ever seen a manga publisher do. And I find that to be quite hilarious. So, thank you, Shonen Jump, for proving once again that you are the bumbling, incompetent retards of the manga publishing industry. But whatever. This is quite a lot of fun. Still, I don't want to review that anymore. I'm very upset that I had to look through that again, but whatever. So, thank you for watching. This was a replacement for the outro. I had something else that I was going to say, but holy crap. So, yeah, I apologize for the, it's the worst thing ever thing, because it's technically not true anymore. Yeah, it's definitely not true anymore, but, still pretty bad.